Committee, March 13th. I'd like to call the meeting to order. The first item, review of minutes from February 16th. If you don't have a quorum, we should hold off on to the next meeting. So the next item, new business, fiscal year 25 to 34, 10-year priorities. Nate Miller will make a presentation.
Will. Let's do this. Can everybody see this? Oh, let's see. I'm gonna.
Yes, we can.
Can everybody see this in full screen mode?
Yep.
Yes.
All right. Hey. It's only been 3 years of Zoom. Got that right. Okay, so we're diving back into the 10-year plan process today. This is this is the update that will become the fiscal year 2025 to 2034 10-year plan. So the projects that we're talking about today it's hard to believe that we're talking about fiscal 2034 as a real thing, but it is. So just as a reminder of schedule, we have the responsibility to submit final regional priorities to New Hampshire DOT at the end of this month. We've already gone through the process of identifying initial priorities, and DOT has now reviewed and provided us comments on those initial priorities. We'll review those and discuss those today. So today is the TAC review of our proposed final priorities, and then on Tuesday our MPO will make the final approval of regional priorities, and then we will submit those to New Hampshire DOT. So let's see, let's see if I can do this somehow. Maybe I can hide this, right? I can hide this. Hide floating meeting. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So as you may recall, we went through the process of prioritizing the projects back in November. And so in November, we identified a set of 4 project priorities, our initial priorities for the regional 10-year plan, that fit into our regional allocation of $10.558 million. And so the 4 projects that fit into that regional allocation, which we identified as our initial priorities, were Bedford Route 101 corridor study update, Manchester Exit 8 Wellington Road interchange improvements, Deerfield, the intersection of Route 107 Candia Road and Church Street, and phase 7 of the Londonderry Rail Trail. Beyond that, we had 2 additional projects that did not fit into our regional allocation, but that we submitted to New Hampshire DOT for their review, that being Bedford multi-use path on Route 101, as well as the Windham Greenway Improvement Project. So since then, New Hampshire DOT, we submitted all of those projects to New Hampshire DOT in November. And over the past few months, they have reviewed all of the projects from our regional planning commission, as well as the other regional planning commissions around the state. Should I let?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I got it.
DOT has an internal 10-year plan committee that reviews the different projects, and I will walk through some of their comments on the different projects in a moment. One of our initial project priorities, the phase 7 of the Londonderry Rail Trail, we did encourage both Londonderry and Windham to submit their projects for CMAQ consideration. We thought that those would be eligible for CMAQ. And we are fortunate that Londonderry's rail trail project is going to be funded through the CMAQ program. So That's going to be funded through a separate source of funding and is not ultimately going to count against our regional 10-year plan allocation. Now, it wasn't the most expensive project on the list per se, but everything helps. And so that project being funded through the CMAQ program does give us some additional room in our allocation. And it's good that we have some additional room in our allocation because the assumed inflation rate is going up. So when we started this process and when we did our initial constraint back in November, we were utilizing an inflation rate of 2.8%. DOT has advised that we should now assume an inflation rate of 3.7% to the year of expenditures. So all of our costs for our projects are going up because of that inflation rate increase. Not advancing. Okay. So walking through each of our 4 initial priorities, starting with our number 1 initial priority, the Route 101 corridor study update. This is recognizing that there are some very different potential alternatives for the section of the Route 101 corridor from Wallace Road all the way to the Amherst town line in the town of Bedford. There's a 3-lane alternative, there's a 5-lane alternative, and there are potentially other concepts or hybrids of both the 3-lane and 5-lane alternative that should be considered. And so through discussions with the town, and as we talked about back in November, it seems to us that the best way of doing that is to update the Route 101 corridor study that was done back in 2002. The 2002 study identified a 5-lane cross section as the preferred alternative. And so taking a look at current conditions and what has happened on the corridor since 2002, does a 5-lane alternative still make sense, or does a 3-lane alternative make sense, or some hybrid? In talking with New Hampshire DOT, we're in agreement, both us and New Hampshire DOT, that this is engineering phase work, an alternatives analysis essentially, and that it should occur within the Wilton, Milford, Amherst, Bedford series of Route 101 projects that is ongoing. So we'll see in the 10-year plan a new 13692 project, likely to be called 13692F, that will encompass this work. So our cost estimate in today's dollars was $300,000. With the inflation rate that we need to apply, that increases to $457,000 on a year of expenditure basis. And so that's what we will ultimately program. And the project will be 100% federally funded and matched with turnpike toll credits. So we're in agreement with everything related to this project, and intend to, as I get to the recommendations later on, certainly intend to fully fund this project as part of our regional allocation. The number 2 initial priority was exit 8 interchange improvements, Wellington Road interchange improvements in Manchester. You may remember that this was originally proposed in the last 10-year plan cycle. We are reconsidering it in this 10-year plan cycle, and it has emerged as our number 2 priority. So we've talked about this project in the past. I won't rehash all of the details, but there are intersection capacity improvements here at Bridge and Mammoth, as well as Bridge and the ramps. We looked at a phased approach to this project to mesh with what we could potentially accommodate in our regional allocation. So one of the one of the elements of the project is incorporating a bicycle lane and potentially a bicycle lane east of this area to, Lindstrom Lane. And where we ended up in terms of phasing this project is looking at doing the intersection capacity improvements, what you see on the screen here, as well as a portion of the bicycle lane from basically the high school through the limits of the intersection improvement project, and then an easterly expansion of the bicycle lane as a future phase of the project. This helps us to move the ball forward in the context of our regional allocation and open the door to a expansion of the east of bicycle lanes in the future. Now, basically what it is constructing, by doing that, we avoid a scenario where the intersection capacity improvements are constructed and then have to be reconstructed later on to accommodate bicycle lanes. We're trying to make sure that the bicycle lanes are accommodated through this area, even if they're not striped until the easterly expansion, they'll be accommodated as part of the construction of the project. So in meeting with New Hampshire DOT earlier this week, DOT and us at Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission agree on the scope of work, and we understand that the bicycle lanes may be extended east in a subsequent phase of the project. The cost estimate for that phased portion of the project is $4.124 million in today's dollars, $6.427 million in year expenditure dollars. And the project will be 100% federally funded and matched with turnpike toll credits. The third project priority from our initial priorities was the town of Deerfield intersection improvement at 107 Candia Road and Church Street. Our concept was to convert the intersection to a roundabout. This was another project that was originally proposed in the 10-year plan cycle 2 years ago, and we're reconsidering it in this 10-year plan cycle, and it has emerged as a priority. We assigned the project to VHB to update their cost estimate based on the 4-leg roundabout concept. New Hampshire DOT's cost estimate for this project came in higher than VHB's cost estimate. So VHB had estimated the cost of this roundabout to be $1.557 million. New Hampshire DOT's cost estimate is $1.948 million. And on a year of expenditure basis, that $1.948 million translates to a little over $3 million. We talked with New Hampshire DOT, even though we're basing this estimate on converting the intersection to a roundabout, and that may ultimately be the preferred design alternative. We don't want to scope the project in a way that predetermines what the design solution needs to be there. So we will, when this goes into the 10-year plan, it will be worded as intersection improvement at Route 107, Candia Road and Church Street. And that will not predetermine that a roundabout must be the preferred design solution. There may be other design solutions that are not roundabouts that get developed through the course of the project. So we're estimating it based on a roundabout, but we're going to leave the scope of work intentionally vague to allow the consideration of alternative designs through the normal project development process. This will also be a 100% federally funded and matched with turnpike toll credit project. In the town of Londonderry, this is the construction of phase 7 of the Londonderry Rail Trail. This is from Route 28 to the Derry town line, 10-foot wide paved rail trail with 2-foot gravel shoulders. The trickiest part of this project is the crossing of Route 28, which is a busy road, and would necessitate a pedestrian hybrid beacon. This, as I mentioned before, is going to be funded through the CMAQ program. So this is not going to, even though it was one of our initial priorities and still is one of our priorities, it's not going to be funded through the general 10-year plan funding process. It will be funded through the CMAQ process. So we're fortunate that CMAQ opportunity corresponded with our 10-year plan process, and that we were able to work with the town of Londonderry and get funding secured for this project to happen through CMAQ. DOT's estimate was higher than VHB's estimate for this project. So VHB estimated $641,000 for this project. DOT's cost estimate was $860,000. And the majority of that difference was in PE phase work. So even though this is a fairly straightforward project, VHB, I think, had estimated $100,000 of PE phase work, and DOT's experience is that projects like this are coming in closer to $300,000 for PE phase work. And so that was the driver of the increase in DOT's cost estimate versus what we had originally heard from VHB. We talked with DOT about that and how that should be handled. And ultimately, when DOT programs CMAQ funding for the project, they will work with the town to ensure that the appropriate amount of CMAQ funding is programmed to complete the project. So they are aware of that difference, and they will work with the town accordingly through the CMAQ program to ensure that funding is programmed to complete the project. We had some additional regional projects that were on the radar screen in this 10-year plan process. The first being the Bedford Route 101 multi-use path. This is a project that cost-wise we're not able to accommodate due to the limitations of our regional allocation. 10.558 million only goes so far. That said, the plan for the multi-use path on 101 should largely be determined from what happens through the Route 101 alternatives analysis, the corridor study update, because the costs and design of the multi-use path are very different based on whether a 3-lane or a 5-lane cross section is ultimately chosen for Route 101. So the corridor study and alternatives analysis process that will happen will help us to get a better understanding of what needs to happen with the multi-use path and what those costs will be in the future, so that we can consider it for the 10-year plan and a future update cycle. The Wyndham Greenway Trail, again, weren't able to fund it in this 10-year plan update due to the limitations of our regional allocation. That said, I think it's pretty clear that project would make a fine transportation alternatives program candidate in the next solicitation, and we would certainly encourage the town of Windham to consider applying for TAP funding to implement that project. We can also obviously keep it on the radar screen 2 years from now in the next 10-year plan update cycle, but this project seems to be kind of tailor-made for the transportation alternatives program as well. And then as we've previously talked about with the Londonderry Route 28 capacity improvements, we need to do further scoping of that project with our on-call engineer and the town to better understand what the costs and impacts of that project would be. And so we'll work with the town on that prior to the next 10-year plan update cycle. So our proposed regional allocation, and ultimately what we need to, our finalization of the 10-year plan process is telling DOT how we're going to deploy our $10.558 million of regional allocation. And this is how we would propose to deploy it. And so basically looking at that set of 4 project priorities, what we would recommend doing is fully funding the Bedford corridor study update, fully funding to DOT's recommended amount the Deerfield intersection improvement project, and then placing the balance into the exit 8 Wellington Road project. So that would result in us programming $7.07 million for that project, which when we revisit this in a future 10-year plan cycle may help to make the easterly expansion of bicycle lanes more feasible in the future. So $457,000 for the corridor study update, $7.07 million for exit 8 Wellington Road, $3.02 million for the Deerfield intersection improvements, and then the phase 7 of the Londonderry Rail Trail being funded via the CMAQ program. That uses our complete allocation of $10.558 million and leaves a 0 balance. So on one hand, we had some savings because this was funded through the CMAQ program. On the other hand, we saw some increased costs from the increased inflation rate. So that is our proposal for all of you today to consider recommending to our MPO for their adoption on Tuesday.
Now, we can't vote on.
I suppose you can't vote on it, but consensus of the committee, I think those members present would be valuable.
Yeah, we have 7.
So do we have a consensus
Consensus of those members present would be welcome.
What? Everybody raise their hand. Everybody out there, okay?
Doing a good job, Sean, right?
Should we ask if there's any concerns with the virtual audience?
What?
Should we check in with the virtual audience as
Is the
well?
virtual audience okay with the program as discussed?
Ooh,
Sorry.
I think I saw a thumbs up from Becky and okay, thanks, Mark. Thumbs up from Jason. All right,
We have a majority.
and
So we will bring this recommendation to our MPO for their consideration on Tuesday, and if they approve it, then we will notify New Hampshire DOT accordingly prior to the end of the month. And we, as always, appreciate Lucy DOT's partnership and working with us on all of these projects and helping us to evaluate the scopes and cost estimates, and all of the work that happens on your end as well is much appreciated.
Thank you, Nate. I'll pass that along.
All right, thank you. Next item on the agenda, public participation plan update by Suzanne Nienaber, Senior Planner of Southern Hampshire Planning Commission.
Of course. Morning, everyone. Let me pull up my presentation. Maybe I'll just make sure I'm sharing the screen to start. This is always the part that trips everyone up. Okay, so you should be able to see acute plant and public participation plan. And I'm going to pop this into full screen now. It's a nice animation. Let me see if I can huddle
can
over.
we first verify that from the home viewers?
Yeah, can we get a
Yep.
verbal?
We
Yep.
can see it.
Thank you.
If you go to more,
You can see it.
and then you hide
Hide.
the video.
Yeah.
Or no, it's actually hide floating.
Oops, sorry.
Sorry.
Show video floating panel. I will hide the floating meeting controls. Great. All right. Thank you, everybody. So out of curiosity, are folks in the room already familiar with the current public participation plan? It came out in 2020, so it's a few years old. I'm not sure if it's something that folks have reflected on in a little while. When I came on board, and Sylvia told me that the public participation plan was due for an update, I got really excited because it's a personal passion for me. It's something I've been working on over the course of my career, is really thinking about creative and innovative ways to get folks involved in the planning process. And so, this might look like a non-traditional slide deck to you. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, this was actually something I started to develop when we were just doing it for internal working sessions with our team here. So I was like, I don't need to worry about it. It can just be cute. And then, I was thinking I might as well leave it like this because it'll maybe make this presentation more memorable for you. And yeah, you can tell there's a love of plants in this office. I don't know if you've ever been to Sylvia's office, but we have a couple of representatives here that are getting some TLC on the windowsill. So let's talk about the public participation plan. First of all, there's a number of reasons why we do it. It's really important for us to have a framework and a tool that helps us to reflect and have some transparency about how we engage with our communities. And, since SNHPC represents 14 different municipalities, that comprises like a huge diversity of different types of people. And we know that the more input and insight that we can get into the planning process, the more effective our transportation plans and programs will be. We also know that this is a really crucial way for us to ensure that we're adhering to federal requirements. For example, Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. We need to make sure we're ensuring non-discrimination based on race, gender, sex, ability, language, nation of origin. It's really essential that we keep this top of mind. And so I'm really excited to be putting together a public participation plan that I think will be inspiring and hopefully a useful tool for everyone on our team. And I'd love to get some insights from folks in the room today, because I know this is something you think about in your own work, and would love some input on the current material that's in development, that's currently been put together by the staff over here. So one of the first things I did was kind of do a cross-section analysis of, okay, what's our public participation plan look like? What's in the other MPO's plans? And, there's different table of contents, like different elements in each, but I would say there's 5 fundamental components across all the plans. Number 1, a baseline introduction of like, what's this about? How is this meeting requirements? Number 2, a goals and strategies section that really enumerates, here's our vision for how we're going to get this work done. Number 3 is approaches. So kind of delineating, here are the different techniques that we're going to use to pursue our public participation efforts. There's always a section about the MPO planning process specifically and how this work really syncs up with the planning process. And then finally, a list of performance measures, stating how we're going to track, how we're going to evaluate and improve our public participation efforts. What I'm going to talk about today, I would say number 1 and 4 are a bit more boilerplate. I'm not going to go into detail on those today, but I'm going to talk about numbers 2, 3, and 5, because that's the generative work our team has been doing that I'd love your feedback on. So as I go through the revised goals and strategies, and for folks in the room, you do have a handout if you'd like to follow along. It's kind of text heavy, so even with the plants that for entertainment, I thought some folks might want to see this in front of them. And as I go through, I'll go through all 4 of our goals, and but I'd love for you to think about, is there anything that really resonates strongly for you? Is there something that's a high priority for our region? Is there something that's a high priority for your community or your organization? So just some reflection questions to keep in mind as I go through this. And I just want to thank everyone in the SNHPC team for being game, for like getting involved and having some fun participatory meetings where we put these goals together. Okay, so the first goal is expanding access to inclusive public engagement opportunities. And I think inclusive is really the operative word here. Some of the strategies we've pulled are, we want to be collaborating with a wide variety of individuals and groups. We want to be capturing the diverse perspectives of the region. We also want to be making sure that we're scaling our efforts appropriately. When we think about when we're thinking about a transportation plan or program, we want to consider who's going to be most impacted. And we want to make sure that those folks are the most intensively involved in the process. We want to offer a variety of opportunities to engage in person as well as virtually. And I think that we've all become more adept at that through COVID. There's been some benefits to that experience where we've learned that there's a lot of folks who are more likely to engage if we have some remote opportunities. So the more we can have that hybrid approach, perhaps the more folks we can have involved. We want to make sure our outreach efforts intentionally addresses the needs of underserved communities. So where there are barriers to engagement, where people might have barriers related to language or ability, whether they might not have regular transportation access or internet access, that's where we need to be putting an extra effort to making sure that those folks have a seat at the table and can be part of the conversation. And then that kind of goes in line with the last strategy you see here, which is to meet people where they are. We know that, especially post-pandemic, everyone's stretched thin. So the more that we can align and dovetail our efforts with existing activities that are already happening, where we can show up and be a part of a meeting that people already have organized, and the less we're asking people to kind of go out of their way for our specific needs, I think we'll actually get much more input and response. Moving on to goal 2, this is about growing public awareness of regional planning activities and priorities as a whole. I think that there's a lot of work that's happening all the time, and we want to make sure that folks become more familiar with the role of SNHPC and all of the cool work that we're doing, and hopefully, even come to us with enthusiasm about getting involved in this work. So a few strategies along these lines. We want to refine our brand. Develop some cohesive messaging and design standards and really reinforce that in all the work we're doing. And so that's a kind of lofty but important goal we're setting up for ourselves for the coming year. We also want to review public-facing materials for accessibility and legibility. Even if there's a really complicated plan, there's often a way to distill that into like a handout, a tear sheet, a quick summary in plain language that is very easy for kind of the average resident to interpret. So I think that we want to be more mindful of that in all of the work that we're doing. That lines up with having communication strategies, especially for some priority initiatives. If we have shared talking points and really strong outreach methods, then hopefully everybody will easily be able to communicate about any project that is a real priority for our region. I love the idea of like highly visual materials. So like, you know, the more we can like integrate really like lovely photographs, graphics, colorful things that help people get engaged, the better. We want to activate our community resource networks. You know, there's already so many strong networks in the region. We can work with libraries, with town newsletters, with our transportation providers and other groups who have kind of on the ground face-to-face contact with many different constituents. And they can be our partners in facilitating outreach. And then I think there's a lot of kind of creativity on our team, and we want to experiment with some creative and innovative outreach approaches. So whether that means we do like a mini documentary, some short and easy social media polls, some on-site pop-up activities. We want to find other ways where we can kind of organically interact with folks throughout the region. Moving on to goal 3, we want to strengthen our stakeholder partnerships, ensure that their input is effectively reflected in plans and projects. So this is really about identifying local leaders and champions, people who feel a sense of enthusiasm and ownership for a particular initiative. We want to celebrate them and give them a place to step up and lead. We also want to have a very active and engaged advisory committees. You know, we have a really strong team, but we don't know everything, and we want to make sure that we're pulling in other folks in other areas of expertise and kind of letting them shine too. We want to expand participation from representatives of traditionally underserved communities. I think that's really important. And again, how do we do that in a way that is not creating like an additional burden or task, but make it an easy opportunity that feeds into the work they're already doing. And then again, developing user-friendly materials. How do we have maybe sample social media posts, e-blast kind of articles that folks can readily adapt and share with their own networks and help take ownership over a really critical regional planning initiatives. And then our last goal is really about evaluation. We want to regularly assess how are we doing and refine our public participation approaches. So one of the things I'll talk about later this morning is our public participation performance measures. We are going to be methodically tracking the work that we're doing, and we want to be kind of transparent about what our indicators are and report on those regularly. We also, reporting is built into the second bullet. We want to regularly track and report on the effectiveness of the work we're doing. And I think it's an important goal for us even internally to take a look every quarter and see like how our efforts are lining up and how many people are getting involved and opening newsletters and that sort of thing. And then we want to explore new avenues for receiving public feedback. Maybe there's anonymous website mini surveys we can do. Maybe at the end of an event, we do a quick exit questionnaire to get some candid feedback from folks. Also, I think one-on-one conversations with people, you know, over coffee in more informal settings is a great way to get together insights about how we're doing and how we can improve. And then I really like the focus on embracing flexibility. Like we all know we can't predict the future. We don't want to be so rigid in our approach that we can't jump on an exciting opportunity or, you know, respond to an emerging concern and be effective about that, about responding and making changes to our approaches. So with that in mind, I just want to take a quick pause. First with folks in the room, and we can also look online. Let me escape out of here so I don't miss anybody. But yeah, any initial impressions about something that really resonates highly for you, something that you are passionate about in your own work, or that you see as a priority for the region? Did I accidentally hide folks here? There we go.
There are a few questions in the chat room.
Oh, thank you. There's the chat. Oh, cool. This is a great one. No concern. Okay, here we go. If you never used the program mural, it's a fantastic way to get people online to share their ideas because of the tactile participatory experience of moving their notes around and seeing others do so in real time. Yeah, I've used something similar. I think it's the one I use is called Miro, M-I-R-O, but I think that's a great suggestion for when we're doing virtual meetings. Thank you for that.
I'll just also add to Suzanne's presentation, we all in our work try so hard to get public involvement and, you know, it's always a challenge, right, George? I mean, I think anyone in town knows that getting people to the table, getting them involved, whether it's a master plan process or, you know, getting input on, you know, like any of the large projects going on in Manchester. And so that's why we're asking you folks, are we missing something? We think we've hit most of the big picture items, but are there any ways that you suggest that we might, you know, go after, or are there agencies or groups, special interest groups that you think we should contact, you know, any insight? And if not today, if another day from now, and you're like, oh, this would be great for them to do, please let us know.
Yeah, I think, I saw the point, and I think it was a good one for us to do the outreach. And I think that when we did our master plan update a couple of years ago, we went out, even with COVID, we were very careful, but we went back out into the community and physically met with people. So instead of having them come to town, and we, you know, Camp Pearlman did a great job helping us with a survey. We had our public meetings and charrettes in the town hall, but we took it out. So we went to the high school in Pinkerton. We went to the senior class during the lunch hour, and we had a board up, and we said, here are some master plan questions. Give us some ideas from the seniors. And then we went out to the Vets Hall where the elderly programs are, which is run by our Dairy Rec department. And we physically sat down with a group of seniors at 10 in the morning when they meet. And we sat around and did the same thing with the board. And we went to both our libraries. So my point is, if you go outreach and physically, not everybody can do computers. And I mean, from what we found, and like I said, Cam helped with the survey, which got a great response online, but not everybody can, you know, knows how to do that.
Exactly.
Wants to do it.
Exactly. And it's also, I don't know, I think it's fun also to go out into the community and feel like you're learning just from being in a different space than your office, right?
Yeah.
And I also
need to get out more. I don't get out enough.
I also love that you're mentioning the youth, right? I think that's a really important opportunity of, you know, working with kids in high school, maybe younger even, right? Like how to get folks excited from a very young age and feel like they can make a difference and that their perspective on the community matters. I love the idea of cultivating that from a young age. So yeah, it's great. Thanks, George. Okay. All right. Well, I have more to share with you. So buckle up. Here we go. Now we're going to move into, and again, Cam, can someone give me a thumbs up that you're able to see the screen?
Yeah.
Full screen, great. Okay, so I wanted to now talk about the section on what are our engagement approaches. And let me make some things small because, sorry, this is distracting now. That's going to be small and this is going to hide. There we go. So when I was looking at the 2020 plan, there's so many techniques that were listed. I mean, there's so much that we do day to day in our work. And I wanted to take it out of kind of a listicle and put it in a framework that would actually help us be more mindful about what each of these things is seeking to accomplish in our work. So, I've worked in public participation and especially in the field of public health. And this notion of the spectrum of engagement is something that's been floating around with a lot of different organizations for a while. And so I kind of took this lens and applied it to the work that we're doing. And I find it really helps me think about a number of things. Number one, we know that participation is not just like one meeting. It's not a public meeting. It's not a one-time thing. It's a process. It happens continuously over a long period of time. It's about building relationships. We also know that like not every approach we use is achieving everything. So I put together this chart, and again, for folks in the room, you have one in front of you that might be a little bit easier to read. But you'll see with each column, you see kind of an increasing level of stakeholder influence on the decision-making process. And each and every one of these elements is absolutely crucial to getting the level of effective public participation that we're looking for. So I'll walk through each of the columns in turn. kind of highlighting the opportunity, the implied kind of promise to our stakeholders, and some of the key approaches that really hit at each of these levels. So first is inform, and kind of at the most basic level, we are committing to providing the community with relevant information. We're going to keep you informed about what's happening in the region from a transportation planning standpoint. And we do that from through a number of approaches, including newspaper notices, website resources, our newsletters, our media blasts, our social media posts. You know, this is kind of part of the day-to-day churn of making sure that folks are aware of what's happening. The second column is looking at consult. And this is where we're starting to get, it's usually kind of a little bit more of a one-way interface, but we're reaching out. We have a question we're posing to the community. We're telling them we care about what you think. And we're getting feedback in the form of surveys, public comment periods, public hearings, et cetera. And then as you get over to the involve column, you're getting into a bit more of a dialogue, right? And here our promise is saying, you know, not only do we care about what you think, but we're going to work with you and make sure that your concerns and aspirations are reflected in the plan. So here we're talking about maybe more participatory workshops and public forums. We're talking about focus groups and that type of outreach, or the public outreach events, the kind of the going to the community centers that George was just mentioning. The next column is collaborate. This is where you're starting to give folks a hand in the leadership role in the decision making. And what we're saying here is that we value diverse perspectives and expertise, and your insights are critical to understanding our path on this work. And here, this is more like intensive. This is not just this is more multiple events over time. And we might be seeing our stakeholder advisory groups, our ad hoc committees here. I think SNHPC's participation in committees here in the region or across the state where we're representing regional interests, those kind of continual relationships are part of the collaboration column. And then finally, empower. Here's where we're really talking about the ways that we can foster democratic, community-driven decision-making and implementation. And the promise of stakeholders is basically we're saying we have the collective power to address these issues, to work towards your aspirations. And I would say that the work we do, in this room is part of our kind of folk efforts to empower. The MPO, the TAC, the Executive Committee, the RCC, we have representation from so many different communities around the region. We have people coming together, working together, making decisions that are affecting the future of the region. And also any kind of legislative education and outreach that we're doing, I think would fall into that empower column. So I want to pause there. It's a lot of material. I find it really helpful to me to think about this as a tool for reflection to overlay on any project or initiative that we're working on and say, what is our aspiration here? How intensive does our engagement process need to be? And what are the tools in our toolbox that we're going to use to make a difference? So I'll just pause right there and see if there's anything that you find really working for you or might be something to tease out further. And I'll make sure we can see folks online. Okay. We're good.
Anything else?
Nope. And there's one more section I'm going to chat about with you, and that is the performance measures. So as I mentioned, our team has set up a series of indicators that we'll use to track and evaluate our public participation efforts on an ongoing basis. And just to go down the list, I do like to kind of package things into buckets to help me think about them more clearly. So we have a number of performance measures that address our systematic efforts. These are the activities that are regularly occurring and integrated into our larger state and regional and local systems. So we're tracking attendance, of course, at all of our standing meetings. We're tracking the committees that we are regularly participating in. And we're also tracking any participation in legislative hearings, such as letters of testimony. For performance measures related to tailored outreach activities, these are things that are kind of strategized independently to address specific project needs or broader public participation goals. And here we're looking at the number and type of public outreach events that we're hosting, the number of participants at each of those events, and the number of meetings and outreach events that are targeting those traditionally underrepresented stakeholders. I think it's really important for us to be keeping that top of mind. We do a lot of surveys here at SNHPC, so that's its own category. We want to be, systematically tracking all the surveys we're running and all the responses that we're receiving. And then publications, really looking at all of the media that's going out that's related to SNHPC, whether that's our own work, whether that's an outside media outlet that features us. So we'll be tracking a list of all of our publications, all of our media coverage. We want to be making sure that we're mindful of, are we translating things for people who are not English speakers, right? Like, are we making some of these key materials accessible to a broader audience? We're looking at the number of people on the SNHPC email list and looking at our average open rates. And then we also have our website and social media indicators. And so we can use some data analytics to track the number of unique visitors to our site, and the number of Facebook followers we have, the number of posts that we're posting, YouTube views, etc. And then finally, with mobility management, I know Ben on our team has a very high number of indicators that he's tracking regularly for his mobility management efforts, but we've handpicked a couple that we think really line up with our public participation goals. So he's tracking the number and type of mobility management outreach events, and also the number of community transportation referrals when people reach out to us and say, I fill out an I need a ride form and ask for help with getting transportation. So that's it for our performance measures. And there's another cute animation with some plants. This plan is we're currently drafting it. What I just shared is the meat of the content, but we will be putting that out this spring, and there will be a 45-day public comment period. But we're looking forward to adopting the new plan. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, Nate Miller with the Unified Planning Work Program information.
This mouse doesn't like me today.
Impossible.
Can everybody see this in full screen?
Yes.
All right, I can assure you that my PowerPoints are very standard and nowhere near as engaging or attractive as Suzanne's graphic design skills are. So I wanted to give just a brief overview today. This is just for your information of our draft fiscal year 24-25 Unified Planning Work Program. In your packets, you all had a copy of this document. And so if you ever had a question of what does Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission do in the world of transportation, it's pretty much everything that's in this document. This is our master work program as an MPO. And it's our contract document with New Hampshire DOT for all of the transportation planning activities that we do. So I'm going to walk through it just in a very high level just to give you a sense of what's in it. There are 3 funding sources that support our UPWP. They're all federal. There are Federal Highway Administration Metropolitan Planning Funds, what we call PL funds. There are Federal Transit Administration Metropolitan Planning Funds, which we call Section 5303 funding. And then there is a portion of state planning and research funding from the Federal Highway Administration. So overall, our UPWP, as we call it, is 80% federal, 10% toll credits, 10% Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission. The toll credits are not cash, but the toll credits effectively convert this program into being 90-10 for all intents and purposes. So we've worked under that framework for a number of years now, and that's the framework that's going to continue into fiscal 24-25. We are seeing an increase in funding for the fiscal 24-25 period that corresponds with the increase in formula funding from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So there is more PL funding and more 5303 funding coming into New Hampshire by formula, coming into every state in the union by formula. And so that is making its way into our planning work program as an increase in our for the next 2 years. Our UPWP is comprised of 34 individual tasks in 5 categories. So those 5 categories are administration and training, policy and planning, public involvement and coordination, plan support, and technical assistance and support. So we actually do track and report to each of those 34 individual tasks every month. So
That's it?
yeah, it keeps us busy. So administration and training is exactly what you would expect it to be. It's the kind of the administrative grunt work that goes into maintaining our UPWP, invoicing, accounting, program administration. Training for our staff is also included in this category. So keeping our skills up to date is always important. There aren't many changes. A lot of the work in the UPWP is consistent from cycle to cycle. We're always doing the 10-year plan every 2 years. We're always doing TIP updates. We're always maintaining our metropolitan transportation plan. So the number of changes that we see from cycle to cycle aren't, there aren't so many changes, but where there are changes, I've highlighted them here. We are going to have additional emphasis on task 102, which is our program administration task in the next UPWP, because we get reviewed by the federal agencies, by the Federal Highway Administration and Federal Transit Administration every 4 years. Our last review was in the fall of 2020. And so our next review will be likely in the fall of 2024. So we need to prepare for that accordingly. And generally that work falls into task 102. Also, task 103, our training activities. A lot of training activities during the pandemic were happening remotely. Conferences were happening remotely, different trainings were, workshops were happening remotely. We're seeing a big return to in-person workshops and conferences. And so that involves obviously travel and in some cases lodging and airfare. So we need to plan accordingly in task 103 for the return to in-person training events. Category 200 encompasses a lot of different things. Everything from the 10-year plan. I'm not going to read each of these things to spare you, but everything from the 10-year plan to our TIP, our metropolitan transportation plan, work that we do on bicycle and pedestrian planning and freight planning, our congestion management process. 12 different items encompassed in category 200. What's changing? One thing we're doing is under task 202, which is our land use and environmental linkages task. We have scoped a resilience improvement plan. And that is a federally designated plan as part of the PROTECT program. The PROTECT program is a new program in the IIJA, and there's a discretionary component of the PROTECT program. And if a region has a resilience improvement plan that identifies particular projects as resilience improvement needs for the region, that helps the competitiveness of those projects in the PROTECT discretionary program. So we want obviously to be doing that work and to be setting our communities up to be able to be competitive for those discretionary funds. And so we've scoped a resilience improvement plan under task 202 to help that effort. In the IIJA, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, there were some new requirements for things that needed to be included in the metropolitan transportation planning process. And there are the most notable change is the inclusion of certain housing considerations. In the past, there's been a fairly thick line between housing and transportation and what our UPWP activities could fund in terms of housing and transportation connections. that the IIJA has made it much clearer that housing needs to be considered within the transportation planning process. And so we've incorporated some of those items from the IIJA into Task 208 so that our next update of our metropolitan transportation plan will more explicitly include those housing considerations. Which will dovetail nicely from our regional housing needs assessment, which is just concluding. The state will be undertaking its long-range transportation plan update, likely starting in this 24-25 period. We have a task 210 that exists in case we can be of some benefit in the state long-range transportation planning process. So we don't really know what that may entail yet, but we have reserved some funds accordingly to assist the state as they, in whatever way they may need as part of their long-range planning process. Another item in the IIJA that is a new requirement for planning efforts in the IIJA is the inclusion of complete streets activities, and specifically a requirement to spend at least 2.5% of your PL funding allocation on complete streets activities. We were essentially already doing that anyway, and we are going to continue doing that in the next UPWP, but we've added a couple of specific deliverables into Task 211 that tie to the expectations of the IIJA. One of those is a complete streets prioritization plan. So if you, and I won't go into all the details of what that is, but you can read about a complete, what we've scoped for a complete streets prioritization plan in Task 211. And there are a number of complete streets activities that are specifically noted in the IIJA that MPOs could or should be working on in their unified planning work program. Category 300 is fairly straightforward. It doesn't necessarily change much from cycle to cycle. We always have our TAC, we always have our committee meetings and our MPO meetings and conduct public outreach. Suzanne just a few minutes ago described in detail some of the pending updates that are going to be happening with our public participation plan. That work happens, for instance, under Task 303. So no changes of significance here with category 300, but we are moving the ball forward on a number of fronts here, particularly with Task 303. Category 400 is what we call plan support, and this is largely tends to be data related activities. So we have traffic counts and statewide asset data exchange, data collection, what we call SAIDS data collection. Our GIS system, our demographic data that supports our travel demand model. All of those things are category 400 activities. We are going to see some changes in category 400, specifically in Task 402. We have done historically stream crossing data collection work as part of our SAIDS contribution. That work we understand is going to be happening through a UNH funded effort that's funded through a separate funding source. So essentially all of the stream crossings in the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission region are going to have full data collection through either the work that we've already done in that category or the work that's happening through the UNH funded effort. So that's great news for all of us that we'll now have complete coverage of our region for stream crossings. The 2020 US Census, there continue to be data releases related to the 2020 census, and some of those data releases have significant impact on our activities as an MPO. And so 2 months ago now, the urban area boundaries were released for the 2020 US Census. A lot of how federal funding gets distributed and administered is based on the delineation of urban areas. There are some activities that we will need to work with New Hampshire DOT and the other MPOs on. We do a process called urban boundary smoothing to make sure that the proposed boundaries are logical. And then we also work with New Hampshire DOT on updating functional classifications of roads. There are urban functional classifications and rural functional classifications that tie to those urban boundaries. So there's a lot of kind of behind the scenes work that goes into making sure that the census changes are fully incorporated into how we do business in New Hampshire. And so that will be happening under task 404. Category 500, this is the local technical assistance, local project support, our regional coordinating council work, assistance to transit providers. A lot of this work happens regularly with, we're always doing this type of work from UPWP to UPWP. One of the things that we have identified in this category as an area of additional emphasis in the next 2 years is transportation demand management under task 507. And in particular, we have scoped an effort to work with business owners in the Manchester Mill Yard to continue to develop and implement travel demand management strategies. And so Tammy Zamoyski in our office will be heading up that effort, and she is already scoping and thinking about how to begin those discussions with the mill yard owners. There's an item here that I've bolded. It's task 504, what we call our special projects category, that we have. We hold some funding in reserve for projects that may come out of the woodwork, things that we don't know about right now that may need transportation planning assistance. Some of the things that we have highlighted as potential special projects in the next 2 years are assisting communities with updating their master plan transportation chapters, doing local road surface management systems work at the request of SNHPC municipalities. I know that the town of New Boston may be interested in such a project. Potentially completing a scoping study for a regional freight logistics center, participating in a statewide transportation needs assessment for older adults, providing MS4 technical assistance, that's stormwater related technical assistance, as well as this kind of broadly defined scoping, development, and updating local transportation studies, including access management plans or corridor studies at the request of our municipalities and partner agencies. So what we may end up doing in the special projects category remains to be seen. Those are the types of things that we think may be coming down the pipeline, although there may be other things that we're not aware of today that emerge tomorrow and that we use special project resources to help with. That's it in a nutshell. I didn't want to take up too much time here going, the UPWP can be a pretty dense, document with 34 different tasks, but those are some of the highlights that we're looking at as we head into the next 2 years. Happy to answer any questions if there are any. Otherwise, I will yield the floor back.
There are actually some questions in the chat.
Oh, okay. Maybe I missed them. All right, let's see. Chat. Maybe worth reminding communities that if you're looking for SNHPC to provide support in fiscal 24 or 25, put your place marker in now. Yes, always let us know. We are starting to develop our work plans. And so if there are things that or anticipate needing our assistance with from a technical assistance perspective, yeah, please do let us know. Oh, these might be from previous.
Oh, that was from the previous.
Yeah,
one.
okay.
Sorry, I missed that.
Yep. All right. Well, thanks, everyone.
I have one,
Questions?
oh, sorry. Before everyone jumps ship here, we have one introduction to make, and Dave Tilton is our newest staff member. He's coming to us from Hudson, New Hampshire, and has had about 15, 16 years of experience at Northern Middlesex Council of Governments. Come up front center, Dave, and tell us your elevator speech, how happy you are to be here.
Yes, hi, everybody. I'm David Tilton. Worked for the Northern Middlesex Council of Governments for 16 years as a transportation planner and a sealer of weights and measures for 7 communities in the Greater Lowell area. Just been here. This is my 2nd week and been getting my feet underneath me and meeting everybody, the staff and some of the contacts outside. And so far, it's been fantastic. They've been very patient with my questions and trying to get my orientation.
So please take five minutes, just say hi to Dave, those who are here and anyone online. Yeah, so Dave's gonna help us with all sorts of things. He's gonna be Nate's right-hand man and so all sorts of things coming from Dave. So thanks everyone for that quick introduction.
Welcome.
I have some other business, just like to announce that the Hooksett Town Plan is leaving, Nicholas Williams. So his position has been advertised, actually, if anybody is interested. But anyway, any other business? Okay, motion for adjournment.
Thanks everyone for coming.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.